Hi there, my name is Max, though most of you know me as Culture1019, and as part of a college project that I'm doing, I wanted to do a YouTube tutorial video just doing a basic improvised rundown of how to make a simple rocket launcher tool in Roblox Studio from scratch, even if you've never done any scripting or really developed a game at all. I just want to see if I can kind of walk you through the process, like my thought process and how I would do something like this. I've been using Roblox Studio for about 11 to 12 years now, so I've seen a lot of the iteration it's gone through, and I have a lot of experience with the platform. So I'm hoping, like, even in this kind of casual, laid-back setting, I can at least teach you guys something useful and kind of get you started in Roblox development in some shape or form. So moving on from that, if you don't know like how to get Roblox Studio, obviously you need to make an account, but once you're logged in, and if you've ever launched a Roblox game, like say for example here's the Roblox Realistic Forest demo, if you're able to launch a game, like you have this window here, if you don't, then you should, like, it'll show you the installation process. Once you have like the game client installed and you can play games, you actually should have Roblox Studio automatically installed. So if I go to the start menu, scroll down to where it says Roblox Studio, you should have that, and then you can just click that and it should launch. If it's not immediately launching, it's probably installing, but yeah, you should see this splash startup screen. So in this view, what I would usually do is like just open up the baseplate template, and from there you have a simple baseplate open. Now, if you don't know how to use the camera in Roblox Studio, you can use WASD, or sorry, you'll want to like right click on the window first. If you're holding down the right mouse button, you can rotate the camera. You can use WASD to move the camera around. And by default, you'll have the select tool selected, so you can grab objects and then drag them around by holding down the left mouse button on them. Things like the baseplate have a locked property, which prevents you from dragging them, but if you go into the model tab, click this lock tool, you can unlock it, and then you can drag the baseplate tool if you drag the baseplate too if you want. But we're not going to do that. I just hit Control Z to undo that change. So I'm just going to lock that again, and let's move on from that. Oops. Okay, so if you don't have like some of these windows open, for example, these are not all of these windows will be important. The output might be important at some point, but like if you're trying to find errors and stuff. But this is just the layout that I use. So if you don't have this view on the right, Explorer, Properties, Toolbox, Insert Object, the Explorer and Properties can be activated from the View tab up here. Explorer, Properties, also the Toolbox. The Toolbox is also visible from the Home tab here, like you just click this button. The Insert Object window, on the other hand, you'll go into the Model tab, and then there should be an action here to activate it. So yeah. So to get started with creating a tool, or just creating a rocket launcher, first thing you'll want to do is insert a tool object. So double click on it on the left, in the bottom left here, and you should see it appear in the workspace. The workspace is essentially like everything that's visible in the scene, and since we don't have any part object physically representing this tool yet, we don't see anything for it yet. But if you drag the tool into the starter pack, just hold down the left mouse button and drag it into there, you'll want it to be a parent of this object called starter pack. And starter pack is a service that essentially just holds tools that should be given to the player by default when the game is ran. So if I click the play button here under the home tab, it'll start running the game, load it up, and you can see in the toolbox there, or the toolbar, sorry, that I have the tool object. Now my character isn't doing anything when I click on this yet because we haven't actually added a physical model to this tool yet. Now there's a few ways we can do this. So firstly, I'm going to drag this back into the workspace. Whoops, I put it under the camera. Again, we can't see it yet, but what we'll do is insert a part. So if you don't see the part object, just search for part, and it should show up. You just drag it in, and it should appear right there. And you'll want to parent this to the tool object, and then name it handle, It's important to name it handle because that's actually the part name that the tool object looks for. And as long as you have that, you can just drag it back into the starter pack, click play, and from there I should be able to hold it in my character's hand. Yep, there you go. Now obviously if we're making a rocket launcher, we don't want the rocket launcher to look like this. So I'd say the quickest and easiest way to find a good model is to just go into the meshes tab and search for rocket launcher. Yeah, this model looks good. It's a little oversized. I think if you remember how tall my character was, this is definitely a lot bigger than it needs to be. So if we select the scale tool, which is in the home tab, it's also in the model tab, but assuming you have the home tab open because you hit play, we can drag on these axes. Oops. We can drag on these axes to resize it. And you know, it might be a little hard to keep the proportions right. So there is a way to do that. Also, if you're wondering how I'm doing those sizes, I'm holding Control and Z. Anyway, so yeah, Control Z to undo, Control Y to redo. If I hold down the Shift key and resize, then I can scale it proportionally. And this is what we want to do. It's like you're holding down the Shift key and dragging on an axis to make it smaller, while still keeping the proportions the same. And then you can press Control R and Control T to rotate it and tilt it. Just keep hitting that key combination multiple times, and yeah, you'll have the tool aligned to 90-degree axes like this. So let's drag the tool object back into the workspace, if it'll let me. Yep. The drag functionality's been a little buggy the last few days. I'm not sure what's going on there. But anyway, so yeah, we have this handle here already. Let's just delete that for now, and then we're going to name this handle instead. And then we're going to drag this into the tool again. And while we're here, might as well name this rocket launcher, because we're going to be, that's what we're making. So now that we have that handle in there, you don't actually have to drag it back into the starter pack. That's just if you want it to be distributed to every single player. For testing, we can still just hit play. You don't even have to drag it back in there. And you can literally walk into it and pick it up. Now obviously we're not holding it correctly at the moment, and this is where things get a little bit funky, because like the tools that Roblox has for adjusting the grip of a tool are sort of out of date at the moment, in that they haven't been updated in a while. I actually made a plugin for this, but it costs 5 Robux, so there is actually another technique that we can use to do this without having to use a paid plugin, and that's to insert an attachment. Now, an attachment is like a 3D point space that is offset relative to its parent part. So you can see that it's here. There's a green point there. And what you'll want to do first is go into the Model tab. Make sure you click on this button that says Constraint Details, and also Draw on top, because that way you can see the primary axis and the secondary axis of this attachment. Now, if I remember correctly, we want the yellow arrow to be pointing to the right, and then the orange arrow to be pointing up. I could be wrong about this. I may need to double check. If I do get it wrong, then we'll fix that. But for starters, let's just adjust. Sorry, I'm kind of skimming through this, but obviously I selected the rotate tool here. And yeah, so what you'll want to do is drag this grip, or this attachment, as we're calling it right now, and select the move tool. Make sure that your move box here is unchecked so you can move it in like smooth increments, and then drag it down to where the grip is. The tool seems to be a little big still, so let me again hold down Shift and scale down a little bit. Oh dear, that's weird. Huh. Here, let me drag this into the workspace. Not sure why it was doing that. That was odd. I was holding Shift and then it was like only resizing on 2 axes instead. That's weird. Yeah, so rocket launcher handle, you have that there. And then I'm gonna drag the attachment to be in this position here, roughly like where the actual handle on the model is. Now this won't immediately apply to the tool grip. We're gonna need a script to do that. And since we're going to be using a script for this anyway, we might as well get started with a little bit of the code. So click on the tool, and then you're going to search for script, and this will be the server-side script of the tool. So like essentially, I'm gonna basically run down the client-server model here real quick. In Roblox, you have one computer that's that every single player is connected to, and there's scripts running on that computer that we call server-side, and the script object is script objects are ran on the server. We also have a local script class. Now, if you search for script in the insert object window, which is what I did to insert this, you'll see a script called local script, and this will run on the player's own machine. And we'll be using a client and server script for this. Not immediately, but in a moment we will. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to name this attachment grip, and then I'm going to go into the server script, and I'm going to set up a couple of variables. So I cleared out the text that we had there initially. Now, obviously, if you've never programmed before, this might be a little confusing, but I'm going to do my best to explain everything that I'm doing here. Let me zoom in a little just to make sure you can clearly see. So, the first thing I'm going to do is type local tool equals script.parent. Now, parent is a property of the script object. It's a parent of all objects. Roblox's data model has essentially this whole tree of parent-child relations. So the script variable is like a built-in variable in Roblox that references the script object that is currently running this code. And then .parent refers to the parent of that script, which in this case would be the tool. So we're creating a variable that's called tool, and we're making it a local variable because we want it to be contained within the script. And that's just yeah, that's how it works really. So from there we want to get a reference to the handle. The handle is tool local handle equals tool.handle, and then local grip equals handle.grip. And again, the casing of the text here matters. You can't have a lowercase handle because then it won't find it. That's about as well as I can explain it at the moment anyway. So from there, once we have this reference to the grip, there is a property that is under this rocket launcher, or under the tool class, called grip, which you can't see because it's a C-frame property, and C-frame properties are not shown in the property window. However, if you do tool.grip, if you type tool if you type tool, then you and then type dot, you should see this autocomplete thing show up that shows you all the properties that are available. These are events, these are properties, the blue box represents properties. So we're going to set tool.grip equal to grip.cframe. And again, grip, there's a C-frame property kind of hidden in this object as well. So just again, I'm skimming over a little bit of details here, but essentially what this will do is it's going to set the tool's grip to the offset defined by this attachment point. So I'm going to hit play, and once I do that and equip the tool, I'm hoping that this is going to look correct. Again, I may have mixed up the axes a little bit. Oh, sweet, perfect. Yeah, it worked. Awesome. Yep, so that's how you would set a tool's grip without having to use any plugins or anything like that. So now we have a rocket launcher in our hands. Now we want to actually start making this rocket launcher do stuff, We want it to fire a rocket. So there's several approaches to doing this. And for the sake of making it look kind of pretty and modern, I want to use a mesh part for the missile. However, one small gimmick with mesh parts, which is what we're using here, is that you can't create them at runtime. You have to actually have them predefined. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for missile in the meshes catalog here. I think this will do. Oh wow, yeah, that's way oversized. we'll want to scale that way down. Again, select the scale tool, hold down shift, and then drag on an axis to scale it down. And once it's reasonably small, we want to like move it inside of the barrel here. So I'm going to select the move tool to drag it along this axis. You can also just use the select tool and then kind of drag it in front here carefully. Again, press Ctrl R a few times to rotate it into place. Now, and then I'm going to also center it here. And yeah, it looks decent enough, I'd say. Now this part won't actually stay inside of the rocket launcher. Or it's not going to, because like if I hit run, for example, like you'll see it right away that they fall apart. They're not connected to each other. And the way to fix this is to use an object called the weld constraint. And there's actually a built-in tool for this. So if you go to the model tab and then go over to like the center here to the right where it says create, click on this arrow and it'll show you a bunch of physics constraints that you can create. We want to select weld. And once you do this, you should see your cursor has changed. We're going to click on the missile, and then once we do that, you'll see there's like this red line kind of connecting it, and it's looking for another part to connect it to. We'll click on the rocket launcher, and then you'll see that a weld constraint has appeared. The part 0 property is set to the missile, the part 1 property is set to the handle. Now, if I hit run again, they should stay connected together. Yep, perfect. So I'm going to name this part missile, and I'm going to put it inside of the rocket launcher. Oops. Right, hold down the left mouse button, drag it. Again, the drag tool is acting a little funny in this current version of Roblox that I'm using. Or it might just be an issue with my mouse. I'm not sure what's going on, honestly. But I'll figure it out later. Anyway, so a few more things we want to set up here. We want to set up an attachment inside of the handle again. This time, this attachment is going to represent the point where the rocket will spawn when we fire it. I'm doing this a little early, but you know, I just want to get it out of the way because it's going to have to be done at some point. So again, I want to make sure this is up, make sure this arrow's to the right. In this case, it doesn't actually matter what orientation this point is using, but I'd rather just be consistent with that. So I'm going to drag this roughly in front of the rocket launcher here, like where the missile is. And ideal, because like what we're going to do is we're going to have a rocket launcher, or we're going to have a rocket shoot out of this, and if it collides with the rocket itself, it's going to explode right in front of us and kill us. So we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that the rocket spawns a little bit in front of the rocket launcher itself, just to make sure that, you know, we're not hurting ourselves in the process, you know. Also, if you wanted to like directly set the position of this to like the position of where this rocket is right now, you can copy the position property under the property window, like copy these 3 values, selected, copy, and then if you go into the attachment, you can find the property called Worldposition, which is essentially the position of the attachment in world space rather than relative to the handle. And so if we paste that in there, you'll see that it's now centered on the rocket, and then we can just drag that out and it'll be centered on the mesh pretty perfectly, and that's nice. So alright, moving on. Make sure you name that to say spawn position. Let's just call it that. And then if we double click on the script again to open that back up, I'll add a variable called local spawn pose equals handle.spawn position, so that we have a reference to that for later. And yeah, now we can get started with actually, you know, scripting this. Now, in modern Roblox development, you actually have to use a special object to make the client communicate with the server. So, to gloss over the details a little bit on that, what we're going to do is we're going to insert an object called a remote event. And what a remote event does is it allows like the client to send an event to the server saying, hey, I want you to do this, or something like that. So to get that set up, we're going to name this, say, fire rocket. And now we're going to start getting into the real weeds of writing the code for this. So in the local script, what we're going to do is we're going to have local tool equals script.parent again, and then local fire rocket equals tool wait for child fire rocket. Now the reason we use wait for child is because of how Roblox's networking model works. Objects may not immediately be available, and if you try to access tool.fireRocket before that object has been sent to the client, it would cause an error. So we want to just make sure that the object has arrived before we start trying to use it. Otherwise, it'll be kind of uncertain, like there'll be some uncertainty in the code. Again, this is I'm glossing over a lot of details here, so let me try to step back a little bit and explain what I just did here. This is a function, and objects in Roblox have functions. Wait for child is a function of the instance class, and the instance class is the class that every single object in Roblox derives from. So the properties like name, parent, what else? Like class name as well, archivable. These properties all derive from the instance class. Now, if you're a beginner, what I would usually do is go to Roblox's tabs are all flying around here. I would go to developer.roblox.com and then go to the API reference, and you can click here for the instance page, and this will kind of show you every single property, every single function, and every single event that is available for the instance class. Now, in this circumstance, we used wait for child, and this page will tell you like everything about how to use it and what it's used for, where it should be used, what parameters it takes, and what it returns. There's again, since this is kind of a casual tutorial, I'm glossing over a ton of details here, but this website will definitely guide you through any blanks that I may have missed here. So, moving on from that, we have the reference to the fire rocket remote event object here. So what we want to do is we're going to create a function called I want to say onActivated, right? So the tool class has an event called activated, and if we go back to the developer hub, we're going to search for tool. Again, I'm just pulling this up to kind of show you the source of like where I'm getting all this stuff from. I just have all this memorized. So if we scroll down to the events of the tool class, and I'll explain what events are in just a second, but essentially like the tool class has an event called activated, which is fired when the player clicks while a tool is equipped. There's also deactivated, there's also equipped, and there's also unequipped. Now, and they actually have some samples of this as well, which we'll be writing our own in a moment. We'll be writing our own code, that is. Alright, so from there, so we're going to create a function that is called when we activate the tool that will fire this event with the position in 3D space that we want the rocket to be fired towards. So what we're going to do is we're going to do local function onActivated. And this function won't take any parameters. We also want to write end at the bottom here to close out this function. And then we're going to, we haven't put anything in the body of this function yet, but I'm going to hit enter and then tab to sort of prepare for code to be written here. And then we'll go back to line 8 here to connect this function to the event. So tool.activated, you'll see it shows an autocomplete there, so once it does you can just hit enter, and then you're going to type in colon, and you'll see the function connect show up. Now the event object, essentially what it does is it allows you to connect a function to an event that like fires whenever like some sort of action occurs. In this case, we're going to call the onActivated function whenever the tool is activated. So we're going to type connect, and then we're going to pass in the name of this function as a variable. Functions are also variables, they're just declared a little differently. Like, essentially what this is syntax sugar for is local on activated equals function. That functions the same way, but this is just sort of a different way of kind of stylizing it, I guess. This is the way we, like, Roblox developers typically stylize this. Now anyway, from there, tool.activated, connect on activated. If you hit enter, you'll notice that it's like auto-completing with the parentheses there, because that's how you would call the function. But we don't want that here. We only want to pass in the function as a variable to this. Now, just to test that this is working, I'm going to hit enter and then type in the function print, and in quotes I'm going to write activated. Make sure you have parentheses and quotes around that. So what the print function does is it actually like writes to the output. This is probably like the first thing you'd actually be taught in scripting. Obviously I'm going much more in depth into like advanced topics here, but again, like I mentioned, you know, this is a very improvised and casual attempt for me to teach you how to do this kind of stuff. So again, if you have any questions, please do let me know in the comments section below. I will be happy to answer some of them. But moving on from that, let's hit play again now that we have this script here. And when we pick up the rocket launcher and we left click, you'll notice that in the output that message showed up when we left click. And that means that it's receiving that, it's calling that function when we left click, and that's good. That's what we wanted to do. Now, before I move on, I want to show you one quick thing here. I'm going to open up the workspace. I'm going to click on my character here. And I'm going to click on the object called humanoid. The humanoid object is kind of what drives the character in Roblox. It kind of it really just controls like the physics of the character and the movement and all that stuff. But there's another property under this object called target point. And when you have a tool equipped, you'll notice, oops, sorry, let me click on that again. You'll notice that this target point property is changing. When I click on a point in space, that property is changing. What that property is representing is a 3D point in space where we last clicked, or like where any input was last processed. It's kind of an old property. It's been around for over a decade, but it's a really simple way to receive the point where the player is trying to click on. But this property is only set on the client. The server doesn't see this value. It does, like if I click on the current server, and then again go into the workspace, click on my character, click on the humanoid. What's happening here is hold on, I'm trying to find it. Am I blind? Am I just... Oh yeah, no, it's right here. Sorry. You'll see that it's just set to 000 because it hasn't actually been changed on the server. Roblox has this security model where the client can change properties, but they won't actually permeate to the server. And this is the reason why we need a remote event. It's because we need a gateway for us to pass this position from the client, like this local script, over to the server, which is the script here, so that the server can create the rocket for us and then, you know, fire it at that position. So let's stop the game and go back here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to I didn't mention this directly, but you may have noticed the tool was parented to my character. So what we want to do is we want to say local character equals tool.parent local humanoid equals character, and we're going to use another function here called find first child of class humanoid. And what this will do is it'll make sure that it'll find the first object inside of a character whose class is humanoid. And this is useful in case, you know, for some reason someone like renamed the humanoid object, or there's another part or object named humanoid inside of the character. This makes sure that it is explicitly a humanoid object that you are fetching here. Now, as a good code practice, it's good to make sure that this isn't null, or nil as it's known in Lua. Whenever like an object isn't found, the value is set to nil, and nil is it represents like a state of non-existence, right? It's just a default value whenever there's no value to represent. So this function returns nil if it doesn't find the humanoid class. Otherwise, it will return a humanoid, and that's what the value of humanoid will be set to. So from there, we can say if humanoid equals nil, then return. This block of code here essentially checks, like I said, like if the humanoid is equal to nil, then we return. And the reason we use a double equals is because a single equal is an assignment, whereas a double equal is a comparison. And what the if statement is checking for here is like if this condition is true or false. And the return statement essentially says, okay, we're going to exit early and not return anything. This makes the function exit early if we know that we are in a condition where we cannot continue. Because if we don't have a reference to the humanoid, then there's nothing we can really do. Because we can't get the target point, so we can't send that to the server. So there's no reason for the function to keep running, because it'll just have errors. So from there, moving on, what we want to do is get the target point. Target point equals humanoid.target point. And again, this is case sensitive. And again, there's also no autocomplete for this at the moment. Roblox is going to be improving this at some point, but at the moment, you have to type it out manually and carefully yourself. So once we have the target point, what we're going to do is call fire rocket fire server target point. This function essentially is going to fire an event on the server with this value that we passed in. And also we can delete this bit of code here. Now, we don't have anything in place to check this yet. Like if we were to run this right now, there would be no obvious indication that we sent this to the server. So we need to set up a function on the server as well to check, or to kind of respond to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop back over to the script object. Again, I'm going to close these tabs and then go to the script. Now we already have some code here from earlier from where we set the grip. We're going to hit enter a few times to just get some padding next to everything we wrote up there. And now we're going to declare a function called local function on fire rocket. And this function will take 2 arguments this time, instead of the 0 arguments that we had in the local script thing. It's going to take a player, and it's going to take a target pose. And this is because when we connect to the fire rocket event, so one thing I just noticed, we don't actually have a variable for fire rocket, so let's declare that. Local fire rocket equals tool.fire rocket. So what you'll find with this with the remote event class is that when you connect to this event called onServer event, which I'm going to type out here, fire rocket onServer event connect on fire rocket. Let me pull this up in the wiki real quick, or not the wiki, the developer hub, as we call it. So you can search for remote event, and you'll see some information about what this class does. We called fire server, and this function takes a tuple of arguments, which means that it can take any number of arguments and it'll just pass it over to the server. Now, if we scroll down to onServer event, you'll notice that the parameters of like the callback to this event are instance player, which is said to be the player associated with the client that the fire server call originates from, and then arguments, which is the arguments passed by the fire server method, as it obviously says here. The point is, when a client fires this event, it's going to check, or it's going to pass in the player who fired the event, as well as everything that they passed in. Now, I'm not sure if any of you have ever done any web programming, but you can't trust the client, right? Because like there are hackers who are able to, pass in bad data into this function, and for example, you could have like another player in the game fire an event that's not even associated with like the tool that they're holding. Like for example, if you had 2 players, player 1's holding the rocket and they have the fire rocket event, player 2 could still fire that event using some sort of cheating software. So it's important to make sure that on the server you sanitize what's being passed in. Like, for example, you want to double check and make sure that this target pose is actually a 3D point, and you also want to make sure that the player who's firing this event is associated with the player who's holding the tool. Now, there's a few ways to do this, right? So what I'm going to do is at the top of the script, I didn't declare this earlier, but we want to get a reference to the player service. And it'll make sense why we're doing this in just a moment. But for now, let's just type in local players equals game get service players. So game is a reference to the data model. It's like the top level object that holds all of these services in the game. And get service is a function that basically makes sure that that service is available, and it gives you a reference to it. It fetches it if it hasn't been declared yet. Which, in the case of the player's object, the player service, not player object. The player's service is always present, but for the sake of consistency, I always use get service to fetch these kinds of things, except for workspace, but I'll get to that in a second. So yeah, from there, what we want to do is check the character that this tool is parented to. So local character equals tool.parent, and then we're going to do local owner equals players get player from character. And what this will do is if the parent of the tool is the character of a player, it'll set this variable to that player that is controlling that character. So real quick, let me just run the game and sort of just walk you through this real quick. So again, there's a player object that represents me in the game, and the player object has a property called character, and character is a reference property, which means that it can hold it points to an instance that's in the game somewhere, and in this case it's pointing to this model in the workspace that is my character. It is a model, and the function get player from character takes that, can take a model as an input, and it'll find the player whose character is that, and we can use that from there to check if the player is equal to the owner. So I just typed that out, sorry. So if player equals owner, actually what we want to check if they're not the owner, so we use tilde for that, does not equal owner, then return. And this essentially says does not equal. A double equals means is equal, tilde equal means not equal. So yeah, that's that, honestly. And then also what we want to check for is so the type of that target point that we passed in is vector3. And we're going to be talking a lot about vector3 in a moment, but for now we're going to just use one of the built-in functions called Typeof. Now what we want to do is check if type of target pose does not equal vector3, then return. The Typeof function returns a string, which is, the text in quotes here, and it tells you what type of value is, what the type of value is for whatever you pass into it. And as part of the sanitization we're doing here, we are checking if it's a vector3, and as long as it is, then it's good to go. If it's not, then we exit out immediately, because we don't want to use that. So now that we have all that out of the way, right, let's print the player and the target pose, just so that we know that we're passing that over to the server and that it's been successfully received. The print function takes multiple arguments. It can take as many as you want, and what it'll do is it'll just insert a space between each thing that you pass in, and it also converts each thing that you passed in into a string. So again, let's hit play, and once I click, hang on, let me pick up the tool. Once I click, you'll see there's a green thing here. The green label next to a print statement means that it was printed on the server. So when I click, you can see that it was me who fired that event, and it passed in the 3D position of where I clicked, and that's exactly what we need, because we want to know where the player is trying to shoot, where the player is trying to shoot at, and we'll be creating a rocket. Here, let me show the constraint details because this position's still here. We'll be creating a rocket at this point in 3D space that is pointed at where we clicked in 3D space, and it'll have like a force object that kind of drives it towards that position. So let's back up here a bit and let's get started with actually spawning the rocket and making it explode and having sound effects and all that fun stuff. So let's begin. Obviously we put this missile in here earlier, and what we want to do is actually one quick thing that I should probably change here is this weld constraint should be parented into the handle, because when we clone this missile we don't want it to be connected to the rocket. I haven't talked about what cloning is yet, but I'll get to that in just a second. But what we want to do is, like, when we duplicate this missile, which there is a function to do that, right? We're going to duplicate it and then we're going to put it into this position here. And if I hit play right now, what you'll notice is that this particular rocket here is not attached to it, but it is still attached to that, or the original one is still attached there. And if, say for example, I were to keep this weld constraint, so I've here, cleared the properties, so let me manually set this. So if you click on part 0, you can click on missile, part 1, click on handle. If we were to keep the weld constraint inside of the missile, and then we cloned it and positioned it there, you'll notice that it's still going to be attached to the rocket, or the rocket launcher. And that's not something we want. So, again, back out for a second, and yeah, that's all I was going to say with that. So let me just delete that. But yeah, I just wanted to drag the weld constraint into the handle instead of the missile, so that when we clone it, we don't have to worry about that. We could have also just manually destroyed the weld constraint in the copy we make, but yeah, whatever. Anyway, let's move on. So now we're going to, now that we have the target point, what we want to do is we're going to get local origin, and we're going to say origin is the point where the rocket spawns. And what we want to set this value to is spawn pose.worldposition. Again, worldposition is the position of the attachment point in world space. I never really ran down like what this means, but essentially, like, you notice how these attachment points are parented to the handle, and they're moving alongside the handle as we drag this around, right? So to get the world position is to say, where is this 3D point relative to, say, 0, 0, 0 in the world? That's what it means to be in world space, is that we're finding the absolute position of this object relative to, like, the origin of the world. There's actually a, I swear Roblox used to have like a thing that lets you view like the world origin. Yeah, it's right here. Sweet. I don't use this often, but obviously, yeah. If I were to delete the base plate in the spawn location real quick, you can see like this is the world origin, and we would be getting the world position is the position of the attachment relative to this starting point. I think you get the point. Like, yeah. So again, from there, let's get started with actually making the missile. So we have the origin defined, and now what we want to do is, well, first of all, declare a variable for the base missile. Uh-oh, just ignore that, sorry. Missile equals tool.missile, and then what we're going to do is say local new missile equals missile clone. Clone is another function of the instance class, and what it does is it creates a copy of whatever object you're calling it in the context of. So we're creating a copy of the missile and all of its children, and this is why I deleted the weld constraint, because if we copied the missile with the weld constraint, then the new missile would also have that weld constraint. So, and we don't want that, because we want the missile to be able to move independently of the rocket launcher. So from there, like kind of really getting to the point, we're going to set its C-frame to equal C-frame.new origin target pose. And I'll explain what this is doing in a second. C-frame essentially is a type. It's a special type in Roblox that defines position and rotation in 3D space. And cframe.new is a constructor for this data type, where when you pass in two arguments that are both the type of vector 3, world position is a vector 3, target pose is a vector 3, what this will do is it creates a C-frame where the C-frame's position is at this origin, but it is looking at the target pose. And now, when we clone an object, it's not going to be immediately parented to the workspace, it's actually going to be parented to nil, which means that it's not in the game. So once we have the C-frame set, we're going to do new missile.parent equals workspace. Workspace is a built-in variable that just references the workspace object. And I mentioned above that I would normally do something like, workspace equals game get service workspace, but workspace is special in that you don't have, in this specific circumstance, you don't have to declare workspace because it's just a built-in variable because it's that special. So from there, now that we have the missile being created, we said C-frame to the origin target pose, like I said, parented to the workspace. Let's run the game again. Right now I have it set to run, so let's click play. Pick up the rocket launcher, and when I click, you'll notice that, it creates a rocket, and it's pointing where I clicked. Now obviously it's not being propelled by anything yet, because we haven't added any sort of force object to make it act like a rocket. But this is probably the hardest part out of the way. Everything else should be relatively smooth sailing. So, the rockets are a little small. I think I could probably make the rocket launcher a little bigger, but that's actually, like I said, one of the harder parts out of the way. So let's actually start making the rocket move. And I'm going to explain this by kind of, hold on. So I duplicated the missile, and I want to, what we're going to do is we're going to create, hold on a second. Why is it not letting me drag this up? That's weird. Okay, well, I'm just going to bump it up using this position property here. So there's an object in Roblox called body velocity. And what body velocity does is it makes the physics of the object move in a certain direction at with a maximum amount of force and a few other things. So if I hit run with this body velocity object parented inside of this missile, you'll notice that it starts moving up. So the orientation of the missile does not matter to the body velocity object. What it's doing is just setting the it's forcing the object to move in a certain direction at a certain speed. And this is kind of where vector math starts to come into play with how we're going to make the missile do what we want it to do. And I will do my best to explain everything as we write the code for that. So let's get this missile to start moving. So we're going to create, well, I parented the missile to the workspace early, but again, whatever, let's ignore it for now. What we're going to do is we're going to type local force equals instance.new body velocity. We haven't used instance.new yet. So instance.new is the function that lets you create new objects on the spot. And you pass in the class name of the object you want to create, and it'll return it as an object that can be assigned to a variable. So we just assign force to a new instance of the body velocity class. So if we parent this force object into the new missile, and we just hit run, oh, not run, sorry, I meant to do play solo. One second here. Pick up the rocket launcher. When we click, yeah, it's still pointing in the right direction, but it's just moving up. That's not the direction we want it to be going in, per se. What we want it to be going, in the direction of a line that's pointing towards the point where we clicked. And the cframe.new constructor I showed earlier, it does a lot of the hard work for us there, but there are still occasions where we do have to do the vector map ourselves to actually do something like this. So essentially, the way to calculate the force for this is to we're going to set force.velocity equal to target pose minus origin dot unit multiplied by whatever speed we want the rocket to be, like say 20, for example. Now, what is unit? Essentially, it is like so what we're doing is we're taking like the offset between where we're trying to shoot at and where it's spawning at, and we're turning that into like an offset vector, and then we're converting it into a unit vector. And what a unit vector is it's a vector with a length of 1. Like, the distance between these 2 points might be variable, but we want it to be normalized to be a length of 1, so that we can very specifically set the speed that it's moving at. So, and the reason I put this in parentheses is because when we take target pose minus origin, we're constructing a brand new vector 3, and we want like this evaluates to be like the new vector 3 object, and dot unit is a property of the vector 3 type. Obviously, I haven't shown this yet, but you know, you can construct your own vector, like vector 3.new 1, 2, 3. Vector 3 takes 3 arguments for the x, y, and z position coordinates, and hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, you know, it'll hopefully make sense in what it actually does once I show you what it does. This is like really where the magic happens, right? Because what that did for us is that one line of code automatically makes it so like the rocket's shooting in the right direction now, just like that. And it's really that's all it is. Now, obviously, this isn't a fully functional rocket yet because we don't have the rockets exploding on contact or anything yet. But that was probably, like I said, one of the harder parts of actually making this work. So, good job getting to this point so far. I know that my rambling here is a little bit unorganized and all over the place, but I'd say, you know, just you're doing a good job so far. That's all I can say. So, alright. Now we want to make this rocket explode on contact. And obviously, objects in Roblox have an event that allows you to detect when, you know, they come into contact with something. So what we're going to do is we're going to do new missile dot touched connect function hit. And what I just did here is what we call an anonymous function, where we aren't actually declaring this function as a variable anywhere, we're just declaring it on the spot in this context. And what you can do with this is, I don't think we're going to be using the hit variable for anything, but what we'll do is we're going to create an explosion. Local e exp equals instance.new explosion. Explosion is a built-in object in Roblox that creates an explosion particle effect and actually like breaks joints, you know, makes parts start go flying, like relative to the origin and stuff like that. It'll make sense once you see it. So exp.position, what we're going to set it to is the position that the rocket is in when it comes into contact with something. So it's going to be new missile.position. And again, position is a property of both the explosion class and the part class. You saw it earlier when I adjusted the rocket to be a little bit higher in the air when I was showing it with that example, but yeah, you get the idea. exp.parent equals workspace, and once we create this explosion, we'll also want to destroy the missile. So new missile destroy. Destroy is a function of the instance class. It destroys the object and all of its children in sort of a recursive fashion. You don't need to know what that means. I'm saying that's how it works. So now we have an explosion effect that occurs when the rocket explodes. So let's hit play, pick up our rocket launcher, and boom, there you go. Now you may notice that the rocket's jittering a little, and I just blew up my hand. Nice. That's one of the things, that's why we wanted this rocket to be spawned forward a little bit. maybe let me show that one more time, just because I ended that a little too quickly. Maybe you didn't catch what was going on there. So when I fired a rocket, do you notice that there's like a little bit of a pause there, and it like kind of pauses in the air sometimes? What that is a feature in Roblox called network ownership. And what network ownership is their way of distributing physics to other players' machines, and like kind of switching that ownership between the server and the clients. And the reason they do that is because you know, the speed of light is unfortunately like not infinite, so it takes time for actions to permeate from a server to other people's machines, like kind of like 100 milliseconds, for example. And that's a very noticeable delay if you're like trying to interact with physics in real time. So they'll move the physics onto the player's machine so that they can interact with them in real time. Obviously I don't have any physics objects here besides the rocket itself to kind of show off this behavior, but you can see like when it does this transition, there's like a delay, and like there's a radius around the player that gradually gets bigger and bigger as time goes on while they join the game. I'm kind of skipping over a lot of details as usual there, but to fix this, all you have to do is call a function called setNetworkOwner. New missile setNetworkOwner player, and this will make it so there's no automatic network ownership. The player will always be the client will always be in control of the missile's physics, and it'll remove any jitter or delay like that. So once I hit play, wait for it to load up again, pick up the rocket. Now it's like buttery smooth. It'll never lag or anything like that. It's always consistent, always looks the way you want. Now obviously, you know, we don't want to finish up here. We want to add some sound effects. We want to add some firing sound effects, you know, maybe some particle effects to the rocket itself, things like that. But in general, that's most of the, we're done with most of the work with this, essentially. Now we're just going to make it look a little prettier. So what we're going to do is going to add a sound effect to the explosion. And we can go into the audio tab of Toolbox here to do this. Search for explosion, and there's a lot of effects you can use, really. Really whatever you want. But I'm just gonna choose, like, let's just choose this one. And this inserted, like when we click on this, it inserts a sound object into the workspace. Ideally, where I would store this is inside of the missile object, right? So I'm gonna put it in there. And there is like, so the thing about sound objects is that if they're destroyed, like because of the rocket being destroyed, then they'll stop playing. But there is a special feature in place that Roblox has called the play on remove checkbox here. And as long as that's set to true, the sound will automatically just be spawned and emit whenever it's destroyed. And we can use that property to our advantage to automatically create an explosion sound without any scripting, just by having that set to true and having it parented to the missile. So if we try that out real quick, let's see. Pick that up, fire it. Yep, there you go. Now it has an explosion sound effect. Beautiful. You may also want to have a sound effect for, say, the missile itself, right? Like it being shot. So let's search for, say, a missile sound effect. And ideally, this should be like something where it's just a missile flying by, right? Okay, that's a terrible sound. That's, sometimes you'll find off-topic sound effects here. It's you kind of just have to search around, and eventually you'll find something. Let me try searching for like rocket or something. Nope, that's music. Music. Yeah, they really need to do a better job at sorting this stuff. Well, what I guess as a fallback for now, I know for a fact that Roblox has, like, if I search for a rocket launcher in the toolbox, I can find a quick sound effect in something that was already made, right? So, yep, there's a swoosh sound effect right here. That's good. That works fine. I'll just drag that into the... Oh, that's weird. Yeah, again, my mouse is really messed up right now, so I need to figure out why. I can't drag objects very well. Anyway, so we put that swoosh sound effect into here, and now there is a checkbox where we could set, like, playing to true and set it to be a looped sound effect. But if I did that, then it'll automatically start playing that sound effect just from the tool itself, which is not what we want, right? So let's set playing to false, or uncheck that, right? And then what we'll do instead is, we'll have that sound effect there, but in the server script that we wrote, we can essentially just say new missile.swoosh.playing equals true, or alternatively just call the play function. That works too. So instead of it automatically playing for no reason, we can just make that sound effect be played using the play function of the sound class, and like when we're firing that missile. So again, let's hit play. Now the rocket has a sound effect while it's flying. Awesome. Yeah, so we can add a few more visual effects if you would like to see those, but from here, the rest is really up to you, like whatever you want to do with this, you can do whatever. Obviously, one thing you may notice is that we can fire the rocket launcher pretty quickly because there's no limitation. Maybe you want to reload a sound, maybe you want there to be some sort of delay between firing. And one way you can do that is to say, there's a property of the tool class called enabled, which you can use for this. If not tool.enabled, then return, and this will make the function not work if the enable property is unchecked. We want it to be enabled, but what you can do is you can set tool.enabled equals false, and then use the built-in function called wait. This will make it so the function times out for 1 second, and then set tool.enabled equals true. And from there, if I were to spam click the rocket launcher, it will not let me fire that frequently. It'll only let me fire once a second. And you can set that delay to anything you want, right? So as you can see, I'm spam clicking, but it's not doing anything. So yeah, that's about it really. One last thing I'll add real quick is a little fire effect to the missile when it's firing. There's a built-in particle effect for this called fire. Obviously that is way too big, so we'll adjust some of its properties. You can turn its heat down to 0, which will make it look a little more spherical. You can bump its size down to 2, which will make it way smaller. And also, let me scale up the rocket just a little bit, because obviously this has been an issue for a little while. So I'm going to make it a little bigger. And obviously we don't want that fire to be visible before the rocket has been shot. So let's set enable to false, and then go back into the scripts real quick. I'm going to set new missile.fire.enabled equals true, because it's a boolean, which means it can be true or false. So yeah, from there, hit play again, and I would say that, at least for now, the rocket launcher looks good. Yep, there you go. Now you got a rocket launcher that has like a little fire effect. And yeah, I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up for now. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. I did run over a lot of things here, and obviously if you haven't had experience with some of this stuff, I probably could have done a little bit of a better job explaining some of these things, but yeah, this is really, it's really not too hard, is it? I guess. Yep, so like I said, let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to answer them. But other than that, you guys take care, have a good day. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and take care.